failure is more acceptable. Some of this is like if you're playing with other people's money, you might be less risk averse, more risk averse.
Mm-hmm.
I think the industry is going to dictate how risky they're going to allow their employees to be. I mean, if you're a startup or a Google out in Silicon Valley, they probably got, think tanks over here and think tanks over there trying to come up with things left and right. I mean, I don't think they do. They do have that. If you're working at the local or the insurance company, they're probably not going to let you, come up with writing your own policies to serve clients out there. So, that might be a good idea to create a insurance policy for that, whatever, so it just depends. I think, but back to the premise of what we were talking about though, and Jessica brought it up in the show, I think there's a pendulum swing happening. It could be politics or whatever, but we got so far politically correct. And as Jessica shared, she grew up in a time frame where there were no losers. Everybody that participated got a ribbon or got a trophy or something like that. And if you remember, just several weeks ago, one of the pro football players made his son give the trophy back, and he got shamed for the outcry. Can't believe, and he's like, well, to hell with you. I'm not raising my kid that way. And I think there is a grasp to see the results of everybody's a winner, everybody wins. You don't have to do anything extra to get the achievement. And there's a pullback from that, saying, wait a minute, we're losing something here.
I'm going to tell two stories because I think they somehow relate. When my dad was a boy, he took the lawnmower, his dad's lawnmower. He was probably 10 or 11 years old. And he would walk for 2 miles down the road and stop at everybody's house and ask if he could mow their lawn for whatever it was, 25 cents or who knows what. And that's how he earned money. He used the stuff around him so that he could have money to do the things that he wanted to do because that was what was important to him. Somehow that translated into his work ethic as an adult. And one thing that I did that I was a kid, and I actually got in trouble for this, we had this opportunity. Those of you who are from the Midwest, you know what a grub worm is. I had this opportunity to bring in a grub worm for extra credit. Well, I thought my whole class deserved to have the extra credit because we had tons of grub worms and my dad's always trying to get rid of them. So what do? I go out and I pulled up all the grass and I put it in a pile and I collected all of those grub worms in the yard and I put them in a can. Well, my dad came home and he saw that pile of grass and he was so angry and I got in trouble. It was the first time I actually really, really got in serious trouble. It was the first time I was ever grounded. And that's probably why I remember this, but my week grounding lasted one day because what did I do? I solved his problem of grub worms. I got my whole class extra credit and I was resourceful enough to be thinking I had the tools to do this and I stepped up and I did it. So it's almost like in some respects, I think it's how, and I think it was said by everybody at some point, it's how is what we do received by others. Because if what we're doing is so weird and out of the box that it's kind of shut down and shunned, we lose our ability to take risk. But if it's, well, you're going to get in trouble because that was not the right thing to do, or, within this situation, this isn't going to work. However, here's what you did well. You learn to shape that creativity, if you will. You learn to shape the opportunity to use what's around to get to the goal that you want. And I think companies, if people knew how to I'm totally on a problem solving thing. If people knew how to problem solve, they'd probably let people take more risk.
I'm going to jump off and let Scott join in.
Okay, Randy.
Randy.
See y'all.
Bye, Randy.
Bye.
See ya. So what had the biggest impact at that time, Jessica? Your father's admonitions, or the fact that you got your class extra credit and you solved this problem? Which stayed with you the longest?
Both. I mean, that's why I shared both. In my situation, I was like, wow, I really made my dad angry. And it's a family joke now. But at the same point in time, it's like, hey, I got the entire class extra credit. So that was the part that drove me originally. I had no idea I was going to get in trouble until it happened.
But you had, see, that's what I wanted to get to in the show about more than we actually had. And that is the role of confidence in being in failure. People who take risks tend to be more confident people, right? And like in my case, I mean, I was afraid of getting in trouble all the time. So, unless I was certain that what I was doing was right, I tended to kind of shy away from it, which is, not what you want to do if you want to get ahead anywhere, right? But that was me. And I kind of sailed through life because, fortunately or unfortunately, it probably turns out that I was fairly capable of that stuff, so I never hit, areas where my life was going to change because I couldn't do something. I could always manage to do something, but I was never great. My life was basically, I don't know, the exaltation of, instead of failure, maybe average. Like I was your average kid. In grade school, high school, I was average. And that to me now, I'm thinking, we just passed. And all the kids in my class felt the same way. They just wanted to pass. But this is a different era now, right? And you can't just pass anymore. I mean, because everything's so competitive that you have to really excel. And I think that either pushes people further behind the line or pushes those who have that drive and confidence ahead of the line.
Well, some of it also is what example you got, from your family and your teachers and so on. And, my dad is somebody who was told that he was a salesman. He worked in a typography company, and it was a small company when he joined it, and he ended up owning it. And he decided he was going to sell IBM, and everybody said, "Oh, you can't sell IBM. That's impossible. You'll never get in." You know what? He went there and he sold IBM, and then he went and he sold the next big company, and because he believed that if he wanted to sell IBM, that's what he would do. So I grew up where I was expected to be equally ballsy and equally, ready to try anything to reach a goal. And, looking back, that was encouragement. I mean, I didn't have a family that said, you can't possibly do that. And on the other hand, I had a dad who, when you said that's impossible, he said, screw you. I'll do it. And
I love that. So what did he teach you? He taught you how to research. He taught you how to know the people you were going after. He was a great role model to allow you to be ballsy, BL. Yeah. And that's the part that I think, we miss out on. And if we don't have that in our families, do we have somebody like that in our work? And if we don't have it in our work, who do we have it in our circle? And if we don't have it in our circle, can we find the courage to take the little step to go find the person that we need that can help foster that in us, just like he fostered that in.
And you bring up a very good point, BL. I've only been, I guess I'm an entrepreneur. I brand myself as the reluctant entrepreneur who never looked back. And lately, and by that I mean the last 2 or 3 years, what I'm thinking is that I'm actually modeling behavior for my son. And if I can try and work hard to succeed, or I can kind of coast or whatnot. But I think if I'm able to plot some sort of path through which Michael can see opportunities for himself and model his behavior after mine, that puts more pressure on me and more motivation, maybe we'll phrase it that way, to take risks and to make sure that I succeed, even if there are some failures along the way, not to give up, but to plow through until there is that, success for me, which will multiply itself, because then he'll feel that he can do the same thing. Just like
definitely.
So okay, are we agreed is there a new kind of feeling about how we approach failure? I mean, have we changed over the last decade or so?
At least.
Do you think so, really?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I don't know.
You don't think so, BL?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think, for some people it's a change, and for others it's not. I think there were always people with these attitudes. I think that you hear more about everything now. You hear more about everyone. You hear more about failure. You hear more about success. Some people were quietly doing whatever it was they were doing. I mean, I'm not sure it's such a change.
I like what you're
Scott?
saying.
Sorry, Scott, you had another opinion.
Well, I agree 100% with BL, and that is, there's nothing new under the sun. So we're not talking about something that didn't exist 20 or 30 years ago, but there's more dissemination of information, and I think that some things that might have been, in pockets are more. Some information is more broadly disseminated about, or at least it's easier to find it if you're looking for it. So, and I think we're becoming more skilled and more sophisticated in terms of how we can view things.
David brought up a good point about there's.
Yeah, a lot more success coaches. Is that what you were going to say too?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Which is brings up a good point. And I think because for those people who didn't see the show, and there's lots. I got the idea for the topic of failure from reading Andrew Keene's book, "The Internet Is Not the Answer." I recommend it. I mean, it's really an eye opener. He's a provocative guy. But he says, in Silicon Valley, the failure is success lie has become such an accepted truth that there's now a San Francisco event called FailCon dedicated to its dissemination. And so, not only are we embracing failure, we're building a cults around failure, meetups and groups. But is this something that doesn't really affect us, little people, or is this just something for the Silicon and the 1%, the entrepreneurs, the VCs, and all that? Is it different for them? And I guess probably, as we mentioned in the show, if you've got the money, you can gamble, right? And maybe the fact that they can afford to fail a lot.
Well, I do wonder what's on the agenda at the FailCon. What do they talk about? Like best ways to fail? I mean, what are they talking about?
Well, I know a friend of mine.
So you don't have to.
A friend of mine attended one locally. It wasn't like obviously FailCon in San Francisco. It was held here in Montreal. It was kind of like remember pod camps? It was that kind of thing, but it was a fail camp. And people would get up and talk about their failures and, why it happened and what they learned from it. And I think the crux of it was, what did they learn from it? And probably to encourage people not to be, dissuaded by the fact that you failed, that, try again, be resilient and all that. So maybe it's like an Alcoholics Anonymous thing. Hi, I'm Ray Hiltz. I'm a failure.
Ray Nazim is here. He said what they do there is they cheer each other up.
Well, probably. Yeah. You're in good company. Welcome. That's how
But
that is a little bit like a 12-step program.
Well, and I agree with something that Chef said, in the sense that if I'm going to do something to fail at it, I will be a failure, because I am a big believer in we create our own reality and we create our own destiny, and we attract somewhat to us what we're looking for, because that's what our brains do. Our brain sifts what we think we're supposed to get. And so when we're thinking about brains and all of that stuff, if we're going out to fail, that's a little different than I'm going to go out and do something. And if it doesn't work out, let's evaluate that.
You think anybody goes out to fail? I don't think anybody does that. You'd have to be nuts.
Well, I would agree with you there.
Definitely people go out to fail.
What do you mean?
That was the point. That was the point of Andrew Keene's chapter on failure. Is that this FailCon thing, this whole cult of failure with it's emblazoned on big posters in the workplace and all that. They encourage you to fail. I think it's a bizarre kind of culture, but who am I? I don't live in San Francisco, so.
Well, there is the point of view that if you've never had a failure, it's because you haven't tried enough things. And I definitely agree with that. Not everything you try is going to work. But, I do think that a lot of this comes down to, can you afford to be a failure? If you're going to lose your house and your car and your dog because you failed in your business, then no, you cannot afford to be a failure. And that makes you much less likely to take risks than if you have a couple gazillion dollars in VC money, which an awful lot of people who are at FailCon probably did.
Cool. I'm just giving because I think someone said, Chef said, we need to lock them all in the room at FailCon and only let the last one standing out come out.
So I'm going to leave it's not a film strip, the panel, to allow some other people to come in and be able to contribute.
Okay, sure. But, I'm just going to give the title of the book that I was referring to.
Bye, Scotty.
Bye, Scott. Thanks so much for the contribution. And listen, guys, if you haven't watched the Ready to Go show, the one we just finished now, do so. Scott has some very wise words to share, as he always does every week.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what I was going to say, is remind people to go back, and this is the after show party, to go to the show itself and watch the impetus for this conversation in the first place. Bye, everyone. Take care.
Take care, Scott. Bye.
Nazim would like to join.
Okay.
He's touchy deaf.
Hey,
I know. I had to think about that every time I see it.
Hi, Nazim.
maybe hello, good evening. Maybe we can open a whole tour in Europe about failures. Also, these conventions and make a business out of it.
well, as
People
David
do,
said, there is a
and they
business.
make a
It's
lot of
called
money.
Success Coaches.
Yeah, bring FailCon to Europe, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. At least that's the way I can, meet new people. No, I shouldn't complain because I'm doing very well. I'm just joking.
That's an interesting point we didn't discuss in the show. Is that everything has an industry. As soon as something pops up in
Failure has an industry.
Well, there
It
you
does.
go.
And the anti-failure.
Well, though, it's what's very interesting is the failure rate on brand new businesses. Once you pass the 2 year to 3 years, everybody's like, oh, well, businesses take time to build up and become successful. It's usually everybody says like 3 years, the first 2 years, but 3 years, So that's quite an interesting.
Some businesses take time, and some businesses seem to happen overnight. But almost every time, when it seems to happen overnight, it was one of those 10-year, instant success things. I mean, there really is no such thing as an overnight success. There had to be some groundwork. There had to be some stuff that came before. And I have yet to meet anybody who, started a business and became wildly successful who hadn't put in some blood, sweat, and tears to get to that point.
That's a good
point. Oh my God. I mean, you just brought up I think it was Chef, I don't know, it was David that brought up the example of a restaurant. Well, I've opened a number of restaurants and I can tell you that I'm very familiar with failure. So yeah, 2 years, 3 years, if you can make it past that 3 years and still, the margin is so small, but you just put so much into it. It's so difficult to admit that it's a failure. And I think, so at one point, and we asked this in the show, is at what point, when do you admit failure? When do you say, I can't do, this is it?
Yeah, I'm cashing my chips in.
I've got to pivot, or I got to go home, or I got to go home to, mom's basement or whatever,
Somebody told me once, and this stuck with me. It was probably my chiropractor, believe it or not. Matthew Howe, he said to me, the other side of failure is ecstasy. They actually have the same physical responses.
I can't do those pills. They don't agree with me. No.
But it's really, and I thought about that and I was thinking about it, and we think about opposites, happy and sad and mad and glad, or whatever that is. And we tend to stay on the positive side or want that high all the time. And what happens if it's okay? I mean, what if just being and not really in a place of ecstasy, but not really in a place of failure, what if that's okay? And I think we might need to talk about the middle ground a little bit, because we're always seeking that next high, if you will. And I don't think we need it. And if we're not having that high, what are we running from, avoiding, or fearful of over here? And really, if we could just meet in the middle and go, it could go either way, because it's all chaos anyway.
It's funny you mentioned the middle ground. Yes, that's very good, because there's a quote here that I had come across when I was researching the shows. There's a middle and gray areas. Life happens in those areas. Life doesn't happen on the ends. And like Seth Godin says in Pull the Box, he does a masterful job of arguing for taking the initiative, being accountable, making stuff happen, owning your failures and learning them. But he says, it's not, failure is not to be feared. It's hopefully a temporary impediment. But it's not the goal, heaven forbid, nor is it an acceptable outcome to be glorified. And that's what we're talking about today, is this glorification of failure, this new industry around it. It is a middle ground thing. You're not a complete failure, and few people are really complete successes, right? So it's where you find yourself, and I think probably how comfortable you are with where you are.
Okay. You put it right. It's being comfortable where you're at, and where you look at certain things about businesses. Are you happy doing what you're doing? The money issues, you reach a point where you say, okay, I'm comfortable with this, and there's no need for me to become obsessed about getting to a higher echelon and being, the different things drive different people. I think, so.
Do you think social media, Nazim, has caused us to be more critical of ourselves because we're so face-to-face, so exposed to people's successes and experiences?
It's a great,
right? Because we can compare ourselves to all the time now. And we used to only compare ourselves to our close friends or neighbors. Now, keeping up the Joneses are like a billion people.
But you know what happens? Yeah, that's a good. But you know what happens on social media for me in the last? I mean, having dealt with it in the last 2 years, where Google Play, meeting everybody, and I know everybody in here, is that I am always pushing for everybody. It's kind of like, you want the best for everybody.
I know he's such a nice guy.
No, but I'm going
to give him props. What's that?
No, I didn't want props. But I mean, I really think that everybody's trying to build their own businesses and do their own things, and the more support, even just moral support, from everybody in social media, the people that I know, is I think it's for me. I mean,
it helps.
It helps because we all go through our ups and downs, and even in not only business wise, even when you have situations that are health related or family wise, and you have your friends that through social media that you've met, but you know them not physically, personally, but when they they're like everybody's. That's what I love about social.
And someday you meet them in real life, and you see that in fact they have legs.
Exactly. Well, I keep inviting everybody to come over to Italy, but nobody takes me up on the offer.
I'd like to do that.
Hey, listen, man. I'll give you my address if you want to mail me an airline ticket. It's
There's a technical link.
You're right there.
Listen, I want to because David is in the audience.
I'm gonna go right out and let David in.
Okay, I can go. You stay. I can go.
No, Jessica, you stay. I'm fine.
All right. A big hug.
Let's go. Bye.
Because I want to ask David a couple of questions. He brought up a couple of points. One was not to pivot, and I'd be interested to know why he said that.
It's a buzzword. It's the latest buzzword.
Buzzword.
Yeah, I love it. I can't wait.
So I know. Because I pivot, I get dizzy. I pivot so much. I mean, that's
round and round and round.
So, David, why shouldn't we pivot?
So I was in a blab earlier today with Ted Rubin, and we were talking about pivoting.
Oh, okay.
And seriously, in both our opinions, pivoting is just a way of basically saying you don't have any conviction in what you're doing, so you pivot to a different idea because you don't have the wherewithal to stick by your convictions of what you're doing. So you think that you need to continually adjust it and do what other people are telling you to do, or to get those immediate responses. That you can't.
Well, but that brings up the question we discussed before. Like, when do you throw in the towel? How do you know?
That's entirely up to the person to figure out, okay, well, where are my milestones that I need to achieve, and what are my realistic milestones to achieve in what time frame? I think people need to approach their ideas with those milestones in mind, with those time frames in mind, with their budget in mind, and say, you know what, if I haven't done this in 6 months, then it's obvious that I can't do it. It's not going to happen within this, but so much now, if it doesn't happen in a week and, we pivot, we give up on our ideas. Ted was bringing up the example of his daughter on Instagram, how kids, if they post a picture to Instagram and they don't get 100 likes within the first hour, they think that Instagram post was a failure. So they take it down. I mean,
they take it down.
Yeah, they actually remove it because they don't want it hanging up there as like this badge of shame that nobody liked their picture.
Well, they haven't created posts then. They haven't created signposts and, KPIs or whatever data that you had. At this point, I hope to achieve this. And you get to that point and you haven't achieved it. Then you have to make a decision. Did I do something wrong? Examine what you've done, see if you can correct it or not, But I think that, people do throw in the towel, but is that, when do you throw in the towel? And I think people who throw in the towel because they didn't get enough likes obviously weren't prepared to embark on that to begin with.
Well, I mean, from the restaurant idea, you open a fine dining restaurant establishment, it never catches on. So you pivot to make it a fast casual. Then suddenly you're doing takeout and then Groupons, and you're continually pivoting. And where do you end up? You've ended up so far removed from what could have been your right concept, but you didn't stick with it. And you should either just go with it or let it fail.
If you had the money, if you had the wherewithal, I mean, we have talked about this during this conversation. Some of this is financial. If you have the backing, if you have, the way to keep going. I mean, some people can't.
But is it, David, is it a question of not so much not pivoting, but knowing when to do that? Because pivoting means basically you're being responsive to the situation, to the environment. So you have to make a decision whether to pivot halfway or do a whole 360 pivot. I mean, that's another question, but you have to be responsive to environments.
What about
accept that it was a failure, close it down, and start a new one? You know, I think that's doing the Donald Trump.
How is that not a pivot?
Well, because that's a restart. That's a flat out restart.
Oh, that's semantics.
No, I don't think it's semantics, because I think the pivoting is like when you're continually transforming your restaurant and trying to rebrand it and move it to something else and adjust your
you get to mediocre is really what happens. You pivot so much, you end up in this place of mediocrity, and you've lost your competitive advantage. And the only way to start it over again is to quit, close it, start over, and go, well, now where did I go wrong? And maybe back up a few steps or start in a completely different place.
Yep. Chef Dennis just said, pivot to mediocrity.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're Donald Trump, and then you pivot, and then you basically, declare bankruptcy and start a new one 20 times. But,
like Donald Trump. I'm going to go and let.
It was good to see you guys.
Yes, it's lovely to see you. And
good to see you again.
Got to be gone. Bye.
So I'll be expecting your suggestions in the suggestion box for next week. Take care. Bye-bye. So you have restaurants. Do you have experience with restaurants, David?
I work with a lot of restaurant clients. I think we have about 20 restaurant clients in my business right now. So we see it all. And they're an amazing group of random people.
It is. And the reason I was in restaurants for a long time, and I started social media marketing. A number of my clients were restaurants and boutique hotels, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I kind of bring it back to before I was in restaurants, I was in theater. So it's that same sort of collaborative, high pressure, very passionate people doing what they love to do kind of business. So when we're talking failure on that level, it's very personal. Whereas you get the impression with some entrepreneurs and stuff, they don't get personally attached to the projects. They're ready to drop it and do something new, right? Without any kind of personal investment, and so they don't feel bad. They don't take it personally. They don't feel humiliated. They just say, well, that's part of being an entrepreneur, and they kind of almost wear it like a badge.
Well, I think with chefs in particular, I think that
this one in particular. Or?
Well, no, their name is attached to it. Their name, their heart and soul.
Totally.
If you're talking about tech companies, it's just blue dingoes widgets. There's no association. There's no heart and soul in it. And I think that's the difference. I think with some industries, they're more likely to really feel attached and have their name attached to it, and others not so much.
I think in the food industry, the heart and soul people, the ones that really give everything they have to it, rarely achieve the level of success that the people that are more business oriented when they take that approach towards a restaurant achieve, because they're giving so much of themselves. I mean, you see the people not to badmouth any of them, but people like Jamie Oliver, who really has not given all of himself to one spot. You can't give all of yourself to many locations. Okay. You can't do it. So once you start getting that popular or that big, you start losing control. And once you start losing control, game's over. You may be making a lot of money if you've got it planned out right, but it's no longer that beautiful vehicle that you intended it to be when you had
it's sort of like what Nazim was saying earlier. You have to know when you're comfortable, like what your comfort zone is, because it's almost to a point where a chef is very successful, say in a really nice sort of neighborhood restaurant. He's got a good name. He appears on tourist brochures and stuff, but he wants to expand because he needs to make more money to do what he wants to do. And then he becomes an executive chef. So he's got a sous chef under him that's running this restaurant. Then he opens another restaurant. And as you say, then you start spreading yourself a little thin. And all of a sudden the whole thing that made that restaurant is gone.
Yeah.
All that's there is maybe your name. And what does that mean, really, if the quality of the food is different or the service is different, whatever. So maybe he would have been better to stay in that place and be happy with maybe, not getting a house in Nice or someplace,
See, at that point is what you want to do is you want to open that other restaurant, but you want to train a new young chef and don't put him in your place. You stay there because you built it and you cultivate him. I mean, and that's where I've seen some success in the Jersey area. We had a family that opened up, and all of the restaurants were all different. They were all Italian, but they were all different, and they all had their own flavor. But you didn't expect the same chef in each one. You knew there was a different chef in each one, and they built the.
That's an interesting formula. I came back in because I have the case of my brother-in-law here down on the coast. He's a real estate guy, but he invested in a restaurant, and they passed it. They passed it 3, 4. They're at the 7th year, and it's kind of stagnated. It's not losing money, and it's not making money. It's just like basically cut. So there's a point where like he keeps saying like, I really would like somebody that just picked it, buy this off of us, and it's not happening because of certain character. It's a beautiful location. Restaurant's great. I love it. I'm biased, but
it's tough. It's
but
tough.
I can see where they reach a point where it's like, is this a failure? Is this something that, like David is saying, is like, do we pivot? Do we just like, okay, maybe we just do something else? We change something?
It's exactly my story with the restaurant I had in Toronto. I mean, we had a beautiful little, French, like bistro, really popular with the neighbors, but we made just enough to keep our head sort of, waiting on the water kind of thing. And, people were very, committed to it. We had, regulars and all that. But at some point you look and say, listen, we can't continue like this. We can't grow. There's no room to grow because part of it was location,
That's the same issue.
So you couldn't do much about it. So, I went back into the performing arts. I just said, no, I can't do this. This is after like the 3rd or 4th restaurant that I've been involved in. And I thought, this is just too much, man. No wonder everybody in the restaurant drinks.
Plus you got two things in restaurants. Two things in restaurants is that the main thing is it's a lot of work, because I've seen it, and then cooks are so temperamental. That's a whole different.
I don't know what you mean about that. Stop it.
And okay.
I used to forbid my chef to come in anywhere near the front of the house. You just.
What do you think, Dave?
Well, I mean, some of my clients that I think are the most successful are the ones that are a chef and a business person partnership. Where there's someone that is very mathematically driven, that can keep the numbers, that manages, the inventory and everything like that. And then there's the chef who's the personality, the heart and soul that's behind it. And they have their roles very clearly articulated, and they work well as a team, because one is the realist and then one is the, the dreamer part of it. And that's the nice thing about it is that,
well, that's why there's often a separation between the front of the house and the back of the house. You need that numbers person in the front of the house and the schmoozer, because the chef doesn't always have the personality to be nice to everybody. Although now with open kitchens, those days have changed some. The way
I mean, they're a performer, and but I mean, by the back of the house, I mean the kitchen and the front of the house could be the front of the house, but then you have the data junkie that's literally in the basement, who's the one crunching the numbers and saying, okay, well, maybe if we try this experiment, if we have these kind of events, or we do these kinds of special dinners, they result in this. You have like literally an analytics guy in the background.
In theory is good, but in truth, you tell me that, and you tell me someone from the basement is going to tell me how to run my business.
But that's where the partnership that David was alluding to comes in.
No, I know, but
that works out. Yeah, that works out.
Family isn't where they will tell you what to cook, because then you might as well just go get somebody else and go hire a monkey to cook for me. Then, I mean, honestly, I'm telling you, this is a chef's ego. You need the chef to tell you what he can make, and he may not tell you. You may not decide that he's going to go with everything he makes, but you look at what he's telling you he's going to do and say, what is going to be the most successful here? Now, if you bring him and tell him I need this project and let him develop it, that's where they shine, and then you figure out the numbers, whether it's viable or not. But you can never have someone who doesn't have that cooking experience decide what goes on the menu.
Okay, David put a link on the right side. Chef Richard Blaze. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yep. For example, that's one of my clients, and he's partnered with a financial guy who is the one backing his restaurants. But
wow, nice design.
They're doing this collaboration, a numbers guy and a celebrity chef.
That's a good combination.
It's a good combination. It's working. They're opening their second restaurant.
There you go. That's when you go into the expansion mode, which is like.
Well, but it's not the same. They're all different concepts.
Oh, okay.
So they're trying new
Not
things.
franchises,
In restaurant, and that's the beauty of it, is that I think you have to have. I think when you have an idea and a conviction, you can get people to buy into your conviction. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is that I don't think many people have that level of conviction, and they're too quick to pivot to a new thing or throw in the towel.
Right.
And it matters, like, what your time frame is, but you have to have conviction if you're going to get anyone else to buy into your idea.
Oh, for sure. And the magic is finding that. I think the partner thing is so important, because first of all, you need that support, but then you have the artist, you have the creator, then you have the executioner, the person that enables you to actually live that out and work it out. That's hard, man. When you're talking about egos, right, Chef? I mean, you mentioned that earlier. You're talking egos, man. Any kind of criticism about anything on the menu, and it's a war.
Well, I think it's approached a little differently. Criticism. I mean, if you've got a guy that's spending all this money to build you a beautiful building, number one, you're going to listen to him. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's the guy you're going to listen to. You are. But you're also going to try. Now, it's your job as a chef to lead him in the direction you want to go. If he's saying flat out no and telling you what you're going to make, unless you're using it as a stepping stone, you're not going to be real happy there. Okay? Yeah. You can collaborate. You can work. Well, I'm not saying you can't do that. That guy downstairs has to know how to ask the chef how to do it. Yeah. Or how to lead him into that direction. And then it becomes a game of psychology. And, you always give someone options. In any business situation, you always want to give someone options. You don't want to tell them dead away what they have to do.
Well, I mean, the parallels between restaurants and theater, which, again, I spent a lot of time in, are so close. I mean, it's like the producer and the director. It's that, okay, this is the space you can put your stuff in, and this is the people I want you to hire, but you don't tell the director how to block the show or what color to paint the back set. It's a matter of respect. You have to respect your partner, knows what he's talking about, and have faith that he's working for your best interest.
Yeah, if he was to come to you and say this isn't going to work, and he's that sure of it, then you have to respect him enough to go, okay, maybe it isn't. Then what do we do?
Yeah, exactly.
David, where's Richard located? What city is this in?
That's in San Diego.
San Diego. Okay.
Yeah. Listen, thanks, guys. I'm at the end of my half hour, so I really appreciate you jumping in. It's always great to see you guys. I mean, it's like old friends. I see you guys in the stream all the time.
First time I meet David, which I've always seen in Google Plus, but we've never met.
Brilliant. He's even Tim.
I'm actually being in a video with Ray, so.
Great, guys. So take care, guys, and thanks for jumping in.
Take
care. Bye bye.